The phone kept ringing on the desk. Daniel, the man Maya Bennett was falling in love with, and Maya couldn't move. In front of her, under the warm lamplight of her hotel suite, lay a single yellowed page, an old household staff payroll record from a family that had lived in Atlanta over 20 years ago. And on that page, one line: Rose Bennett, domestic worker, terminated. Her mother's name in the records of the Seo family, the people who had thrown the gala, the people who had handed her a serving tray and laughed, the woman in diamonds who had looked at her like she was nothing, the man whose hand she had reached for. They weren't just like the rich family that had discarded her dying mother all those years ago. They were that family. The phone stopped ringing. The room went quiet, and Maya sat very still, holding the truth in both hands, and understood that her whole life had just folded in on itself like a closing door. She had come to Seoul to save the Sale empire. She had let them humiliate her to see who they really were, and now she held that empire and every person in that family in the palm of her hand. The question was no longer whether she had the power to destroy them. The question was what kind of woman she was going to be when she used it.
Maybe God sent me.
Welcome back, loves. If you watched part 1, you already know Maya, and you already know your heart is not ready for what she just found out. If you're new, go back and watch part 1 first, then come right back, because this is where she decides: revenge or mercy. Tap subscribe, hit that bell, and stay close, because Mrs. Seo is about to find out exactly who she disrespected. Let's get into it. The night she didn't answer. Maya didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window with the old record in her lap and let the memories come, because there was no stopping them anymore. She remembered being a little girl in Atlanta, waiting up past her bedtime for the sound of her mother's key in the door. She remembered how tired Rose always was, and how she still made time to braid Maya's hair and check Marcus's homework before she let herself sit down. She remembered the name of the family her mother worked for, a wealthy Korean family in the big house on the north side, a family Rose served for nearly 9 years. The Seos. She had been too young back then to hold on to the name. It had lived in the back of her mind as just the family Mama worked for, until tonight, when it rose up out of an old document and turned her blood to ice. She remembered the year her mother got sick. She remembered Rose coming home gray and exhausted, trying to hide how bad it was, terrified of losing the job that fed her children. And she remembered the day it happened anyway, the day Rose was let go. No warning, no severance, no thank you for 9 years of invisible, faithful service, just a quiet dismissal, because a sick woman is an inconvenient one. Maya remembered her mother sitting at their small kitchen table that night, not crying, just quiet, in the way that was so much worse than crying. "It's all right, baby," Rose had said when she caught Maya watching from the doorway. "They don't owe me anything. People like that never think they do. But God sees. God always sees." 2 years later, Rose was gone. And now, 20 years and 1 ocean away, Maya was holding the proof that the family who had done that, who had discarded her mother like a broken thing the moment she stopped being useful, was the same family kneeling at her feet, begging her money to save them. The grief came first, and then, slow and cold and certain, came the rage. "God sees," her mother had said. "Well, Mama, maybe God sent me," Maya whispered to the empty room, her voice shaking. Daniel Seo knew something was wrong, and it was killing him. For months, through the deal and the late-night calls, Maya had been the most alive thing in his world. And then, the night after the gala, the night he'd defended her, bowed to her, chosen what was right over his own family's pride, she had gone quiet, cold, distant in a way he couldn't reach. He called, she didn't answer. He sent messages, she read them and didn't reply. He sat in his office at the Seo Tower, late, staring at the city, replaying every moment, trying to understand what he'd done. He thought maybe she was angry about how his family had treated her. He didn't blame her. He was furious about it too. What Daniel did not know, what he could not have known, was that the wound went so much deeper than one cruel night. He didn't know about Rose. He didn't know what his mother had done in a big house in Atlanta 2 decades ago when he was just a boy. He didn't know that the woman he was falling for had a reason to hate his entire bloodline. He was innocent, and that was going to make what came next so much harder for everyone. "Whatever it is," he said quietly to a phone that wouldn't ring back, "just tell me. We'll fix it. We fix everything else." He had no idea that some things can't be fixed. They can only be answered. Maya called the one person who would understand, her little brother, Marcus, the boy she'd raised, now a grown man back in Atlanta, with a steadiness about him that she'd never stopped being proud of. She told him everything: the deal, the gala, the tray, the record, the name. For a long moment, Marcus didn't say anything at all, and when he finally spoke, his voice was low and hard. "Burn it down, Maya. Burn the whole thing to the ground. You have the money, you have the power. Take their company, fire every last one of them, and let them feel what Mama felt. You owe them nothing." And God did a part of her want to. A deep, aching part of her wanted to watch the whole Seo empire collapse. Wanted to see Helen Seo lose everything the way Rose had lost everything. Wanted to make them hurt. "I could," Maya said quietly. "I could do exactly that. I keep imagining it. Helen with nothing, the company in ruins, all of them on the street." She closed her eyes. "But Marcus, if I do that, I take down Daniel, who didn't do anything. I take down his father, who was ashamed. I take down workers, hundreds of them, who never hurt anybody. I'd be doing to innocent people exactly what they did to Mama. So they get away with it? No." Her voice changed. Something settled in it, something cold and clear and precise. "No. Somebody is going to pay for what happened to Mama, but I'm not going to burn down a forest to kill one snake." She opened her eyes. "I'm going to be exact about this, Marcus. I'm going to make sure the right person loses everything, and I'm going to do it without becoming her." Because here was the thing Maya understood that Helen Seo never would. Power isn't proven by how much you can destroy. It's proven by how precisely you can choose not to. She knew exactly who was guilty, and she was going to be surgical. The next morning, Maya Bennett walked into the Seo Group headquarters and signed the deal. She saved them. Every signature. The capital injection went through, the debt was cleared, the empire that had been weeks from collapse was suddenly, securely alive. And in exchange, Maya Bennett now held controlling interest in the Seo Group. Every division, every decision, every person on that org chart, including the matriarch who had spent decades treating the company like her personal throne, now answered, ultimately, to her. Chairman Seo signed across from her with shaking, grateful hands, still ashamed of the gala, still not knowing the half of it. "Miss Bennett," he said, "you've saved my family's life's work. I don't know how we'll ever repay you." Maya looked at the old man, at his genuine gratitude, his decency, the regret still living in his eyes, and felt something complicated. Because he wasn't the snake. She'd watched him at the gala. She'd seen his shame. "You can repay me," she said quietly, "by being willing to hear the truth when it comes, even when it costs you." He didn't understand what she meant. He would, soon. That evening, alone in the great glass office that was now effectively hers, Maya looked out at the Seoul skyline and made a single phone call to set her plan in motion. Then she sat back and waited for Helen Seo to come to her, because Maya knew that a woman like Helen Seo would not be able to stand having to answer to the black woman she'd handed a serving tray. She was right. Helen Seo swept into Maya's office 2 days later, uninvited, with all the imperious fury of a queen who'd been forced to bow. "Let's be clear about something," Helen said, not sitting, her diamonds catching the light. "You may have bought your way into this company, but you will never be one of us. I don't care how much money you have. You'll always be—" "The help?" Maya said calmly from behind the desk. "Go ahead. Finish it." Helen's mouth tightened. And Maya stood, slowly, and walked around the desk. And she was not afraid. She'd stopped being afraid of women like Helen Seo a long time ago. "I want to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Do you remember a woman named Rose?" "Who?" "Rose Bennett. She worked for your family, in Atlanta, For 9 years. She cleaned your house, she raised your children when you were too busy, she pressed your clothes and cooked your meals and was invisible in your home for nearly a decade. Maya's voice was very steady, which made it worse. You remember her? Helen's face was blank, genuinely, completely blank. I don't remember the staff, she said with a small dismissive wave. We had many over the years. Why does it matter? And there it was. I don't remember the staff. The woman had ended a human being's life, had fired a sick, faithful mother of 2, and sent her home to die without a single dollar of severance. She didn't even remember her name. She had destroyed Rose Bennett so completely and so carelessly that Rose had not even left a scratch on her memory. Maya had braced herself for cruelty. She had not braced herself for this, for the obscene, casual nothingness of it. It took everything she had not to let her voice break. She mattered, Maya said quietly, because she was my mother. Helen went still. You fired her when she got sick. No warning, no severance. 9 years, and you threw her away like she was nothing because a sick servant was inconvenient to you. She stepped closer. She died 2 years later, Helen, and the last thing she ever told me about people like you was that God sees everything, that you'd answer for it one day, even if she never lived to watch it. For 1 second, just one, something flickered across Helen Co's face. Not remorse, fear. That was a long time ago, Helen said, recovering, her chin lifting. It was business. You can't possibly hold me responsible for... I hold you responsible for all of it, and now I own the company you built your whole identity on. So let me tell you something. The way you told my mother, nothing. She leaned in. Your time at the top of this family is over. I'm not going to scream or have you dragged out. I'm going to do exactly what you did to her. I'm going to let the truth come for you, and I'm going to watch you lose everything you thought made you better than the woman you discarded. She walked back behind her desk and sat down. You can go now, Helen. We're done. And for the first time in her gilded life, Helen Co. had absolutely nothing to say. A cornered queen is a dangerous one, and Helen Co. did not go quietly. She did what people like her always do when they're threatened. She tried to make it someone else's problem. She went to Daniel, and she poured poison. That woman is unstable, Helen told her son, gripping his arm in the family home. She's not here to help this family. She's here to destroy it. She's making up lies, ancient nonsense about some servant, trying to turn us all against each other. You have to see it, Daniel. She's manipulating you. She's been manipulating you from the start. She pulled Vanessa back into the fold too, the socialite from the gala, still smarting from her humiliation, all too happy to whisper alongside Helen. Together they built a story. Maya was a vengeful gold digger who'd bought her way in to tear the family apart, and poor Daniel was too blinded by her to see it. Choose your family, Daniel, or you'll lose us, all of us. It was a threat. It was also, though Helen didn't know it, the worst possible thing she could have said, because she'd just asked her son to choose between her and the truth, and she'd done it without knowing the truth was already on its way to him. Maya knew she couldn't let Daniel hear it from Helen first, twisted into a lie. He deserved the truth from her, whatever it cost them. So she met him, and she told him everything. She told him about Rose, about Atlanta, about the 9 years and the sickness, and the dismissal with no severance. She told him who she was, not just the investor, not just the woman from the gala, but the daughter of the woman his mother had thrown away. And she watched Daniel Co's whole world break open in real time. He didn't defend his mother. That was the thing Maya would never forget. He didn't say that can't be true, or she would never. He sat there with his face in his hands, and when he finally looked up, his eyes were wet with something like grief and shame and fury all at once. My mother did that, he said. Not a question, a horror. Yes. To your mother, to a sick woman, to you. He stood, paced, his hands shaking. And then she stood at that gala and handed you a tray, and he couldn't finish it. God, God! Daniel, Maya said gently, you didn't do this. You were a child. None of this is on you. I need you to know that. I have never, for 1 second, blamed you. But she's my mother, he said, anguished. What do I even... And then he stopped, and he looked at Maya, really looked at her, and something in him steadied into a terrible, beautiful clarity. What she did was monstrous, Daniel said quietly. I won't pretend it wasn't. I won't protect her from it, and I won't ask you to. Blood doesn't make her right. He swallowed hard. Whatever you have to do, Maya, whatever justice this needs, I'm not standing in front of her. I'm standing with you. It was the moment Maya had been most afraid of, the moment she'd been sure she'd lose him to his own family. Instead, he chose her. He chose right. And Maya understood that whatever else the CO name had produced, it had somehow, against all odds, also produced this, a good man, standing in the wreckage of his family's sins, choosing the truth anyway. I'm so sorry, she whispered, and she wasn't sure if she was apologizing or grieving or both. Don't be sorry, be free, finish this, and then come back to me. There was one more person who had to hear it, and this one Maya let Daniel handle, because some truths a son has to carry to his father himself. Daniel told Chairman So everything. The old man, proud, decent, already so ashamed of the Gala, listened to the story of Rose Bennett with a face that aged 10 years in 10 minutes. And when his son finished, Chairman So was quiet for a long, long time. I knew, he finally said, his voice hollow. Daniel went still. What? Not the details, not how sick she was, but I knew Helen let people go without care. I knew she ran our household like the staff were furniture. I told myself it wasn't my concern. The house was her domain. His hands trembled. I looked away, Daniel. For 40 years I looked away from the kind of woman I married, because it was easier. And a good woman died because of the kind of woman I let her be. He stood, slowly, like every bone hurt. I have spent my whole life building something I thought was honorable, and I built it beside a woman with no honor at all, and I called it love because I was too much of a coward to call it what it was. He looked at his son with wet, resolute eyes. I can't undo what was done to that woman, but I will not spend one more day of my life pretending I didn't marry the person who did it. That night, Chairman So told Helen he wanted a divorce, not because of the company, not because of the scandal, but because after 40 years he had finally looked directly at who his wife was, and he could not bear to keep loving her. Helen, who had spent her whole life certain her position was untouchable, felt the first pillar of her world fall. It would not be the last. Maya could have destroyed Helen quietly, but Rose had been discarded in silence, in private, with no one to witness the injustice, and Maya decided that this injustice, the answer to it, would happen in the light, where everyone could see. She called a meeting, the full So Group board, the senior family, the same circle of glittering, powerful people who had stood in that ballroom and watched her serve champagne, and she stood at the head of the table, not with a tray this time, but with the truth. She laid it out plainly. She told who she was. She told them about Rose Bennett, 9 years of service, a sickness, a dismissal with no severance, a death. She produced the record, the yellowed page. Rose Bennett, domestic worker, terminated. She let them read it. She let it sit in the silence. The woman who made that decision is the same woman who handed me a serving tray at her own gala, who has spent her whole life believing that some people are born to be served and others born to be invisible. She looked at Helen, pale and rigid at the end of the table. I now control this company, and I will not have it led, shaped, or represented in any capacity by a person who treats human beings as disposable. Effective immediately, Helen So holds no position, no title, no voice, and no stake in this organization. She is removed completely. There was no shouting, no spectacle, just the quiet, total dismantling of a woman who had believed herself untouchable, done with the same cold efficiency she had once used to dismantle a dying mother of 2. Vanessa, who had hitched her wagon to Helen's power, watched that power evaporate and understood too late that she had bet on the wrong horse. The family that had been grooming her for Daniel wanted nothing more to do with the woman who'd helped Helen spread lies. Her engagement prospects, her social standing, her carefully built future, all of it walked out the door with Helen. And Helen so, stripped of her company, her marriage, her son's respect, and the diamond's bright illusion that she was better than the people she stepped on, finally understood what it felt like to lose everything to someone who decided you were inconvenient. God sees everything. 20 years late, Rose Bennett had been answered. Here is the part of the story that mattered most, the part where Maya could have become the very thing she hated. When it was done, when Helen had lost it all, Maya found her alone in the emptying boardroom, a fallen queen with nowhere left to stand. And Maya did not gloat. She did not twist the knife. She had every right to, and she didn't. I want you to understand something, Maya said quietly. I didn't do this because I'm cruel. I did it because what you did had to be answered, and no one ever answered for it. That's the difference between us, Helen. You destroyed my mother because she was inconvenient. I destroyed your power because it was unjust. Those aren't the same thing. They'll never be the same thing. She paused at the door. My mother used to say you give what you can, even when you've got nothing. She had nothing, and she gave everything, her whole life. You had everything, and you gave nothing, not even her name a place in your memory. Maya's voice was steady and clear. I'm not going to spend one more minute hating you. You're not worth what it would cost me. I'm just going to go live the life you tried to make sure my mother never could. And she walked out, not as the woman who'd been handed a tray, but as the woman who'd answered for her mother and kept her own soul while doing it. Because Maya Bennett understood the thing Helen never would. The real victory was never going to be Helen's destruction. It was refusing to become her. Rose. Maya did one more thing before it was all behind her. She didn't keep the satisfaction of Helen's downfall as the end of the story. She turned it into something that would outlast all of it. She used her new position to establish a foundation in Rose Bennett's name, a foundation for domestic workers, legal protection, health care funds, severance guarantees, dignity for the invisible people who clean the houses and raise the children and press the clothes of the wealthy and are so easily, so casually thrown away, so that no other Rose would ever be discarded in silence, so that the next sick mother would have somewhere to turn, so that her mother's name, the name Helen couldn't be bothered to remember, would be spoken with honor for as long as the foundation stood. You always said God sees, Mama, Maya whispered, standing before a small framed photo of Rose on her desk, golden evening light pouring through the glass. He saw, and he sent me, and I made it mean something. For the first time since she was 19 years old, the wound that had driven her entire life finally, quietly began to heal. She hadn't just won, she'd turned her grief into a shield for thousands of women she would never meet. That was the kind of woman Rose Bennett raised. And then finally, there was Daniel. He came to her that evening after all of it, and there was a carefulness in him, like a man unsure if the storm had taken everything, including them. I'd understand, he said quietly, if you couldn't, if looking at me reminded you of all of it, if my last name was just too much. I'd understand if this is where it ends. Maya looked at him, this good man who'd stood in the ruins of his family and chosen the truth, who said, be free, finish this, and come back to me. Daniel, she said, you are not your mother. You were never your mother. You're the man who bowed to me in a room full of people who wanted me to feel small. You're the man who heard the worst thing about your own blood and chose what was right anyway. She stepped close and took his hand, the hand she'd once been too hurt to reach for. I didn't fall for a last name. I fell for you, and nothing your mother did could ever change that. He let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for weeks. I love you, Daniel said. I should have said it a long time ago. Through all of it, I never stopped. I know, Maya said softly, smiling. I love you too, even when I was hurting, even when I didn't answer the phone. She rested her forehead against his, especially then. And in a glass office high above the city that had broken her heart and remade her whole life, the woman they'd handed a serving tray finally let herself be held by the one person in that family who had always seen exactly who she was. 1 year later, The So group had never been stronger. Under Maya's leadership and Daniel beside her, a partner in every sense now, the company had transformed, not just richer, but different. Fair wages, real protections, a culture where no one was treated as disposable, where the people who kept the lights on were seen. The Rose Bennett Foundation had grown into something national, protecting domestic workers in 3 countries and counting, its founder's photo hanging in the lobby where every employee passed it each morning. Helen So had faded into a small, quiet life on the margins. No company, no marriage, no court of admirers, just the long echo of a single careless cruelty that had finally, decades later, cost her everything. Vanessa had vanished from the social pages entirely. Chairman So, lighter than he'd been in 40 years, spent his days mentoring young executives and, in his own quiet way, trying to atone. And Maya? Maya stood at the window of her office one golden evening, Daniel's arms around her, looking out at the skyline. On her desk sat 2 framed photos now, one of Rose, and beside it a new one, Maya and Daniel, laughing at a small wedding that hadn't needed 300 glittering guests to be the happiest day of her life. "You know what I keep thinking about?" Maya said. "Hmm? That night they handed me the tray, and how if they hadn't, if they'd just been decent, if they'd treated me like a person, I never would have learned who they really were. I never would have found out about Mama. I never would have been able to answer for her." She smiled, a little amazed at the shape of her life had taken. "They tried to make me invisible, and it's the exact thing that made sure she'd never be forgotten." Daniel pressed a kiss to her temple. "Your mother would be so proud of you," he said. "She sees," Maya said softly, looking at Rose's photo, the golden light catching the glass. "She always sees." Outside, the city glittered on, full of powerful people who still believe some lives matter more than others. And in one glass office, a woman who had been handed a serving tray and decided to remember her mother's name, held the man she loved, ran the empire that had tried to humble her, and carried every single day the dignity of the woman who raised her. They had tried to make her serve. Instead, she had made them answer. And she had done it without ever once losing the thing that made her better than them all. And that, my people, is how you answer for the ones who couldn't answer for themselves. Maya had every reason to burn it all down. Instead, she was surgical, she was just, and she kept her soul. She got justice for her mother and became the kind of woman her mother raised. Tell me in the comments, did Helen deserve exactly what she got? And could you have shown that much restraint, or would you have burned the whole thing down? I read every single one. Thank you for riding this journey with Maya, from a serving tray at a gala all the way here. If this story moved you, tap that like, subscribe, and ring the bell, because I've got more stories like this coming, and I want you here for every one. Until next time.